Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the suffering servant passage, and we're in Isaiah 46 and 47, in which God speaks directly to the Babylonians, and then secondarily to His people who are held captive by the Babylonians. Now let's remember that in Jeremiah 29, God tells the people who are already in Babylon. Jeremiah is written later, of course. The people who are already in Babylon. There was a very late 7th century captivity, but without destroying Judah and the city of Jerusalem. And then in 586, there was the destruction of Jerusalem and the hauling away of the rest of the people into captivity. And in Jeremiah chapter 29, God tells the people who are already in Babylon, don't try to come home. Not yet. Not yet. You stay there and you plant gardens and you buy houses and you get married and you have children and you give your children in marriage and you prosper because you're going to be living in a prosperous land, a land which will give you the opportunity to prosper. And that's exactly what happened in Babylon. We see it with Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. I mean, they rose to the highest levels of power. Daniel was important in three empires: the Babylonian, the Median, and the Persian. And even in Persia, we find Daniel being an important figure. Um, and so, it is God's plan that they be there and that they prosper during this brief time that Babylon will be this wonderful, rich, culturally rich, and monetarily rich empire. That's going to be a brief period, but they're going to be there for that period, and they're going to prosper during that period. And then God will send them Cyrus, as He's already mentioned Cyrus by name, and will again, to let them come home. But what God is making clear to the Babylonians and also to His own people is, I'm doing this. This is my plan. Today, at the end of chapter 46, before He starts speaking again to the Babylonians, He's reminding His people and also telling the Babylonians, my plan has one objective, and it is salvation, the salvation of my people. So let's finish chapter 46, verses 12 and 13. Listen to me, you stubborn-minded, who are far from righteousness. I bring near my righteousness. It is not far off, and my salvation will not delay. I will grant salvation in Zion and my glory for Israel. Salvation is the entire point. When we get farther into this passage towards the end, in 55 and 56, seek the Lord while He may be found. Um, and buy food without money, drink water without cost. Come to the spring, come enjoy. You've been given salvation and deliverance. The point of God's plan is not punitive. It is restorative. It is redemptive. God's plan is about salvation. Jesus would say in John 3 that God loved the world so much that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through Him might be saved. But if we don't believe, verse 18, we condemn ourselves. So God's plan is about choice, and we make our choice. But it isn't to trip us up, and it isn't to capture us surreptitiously or through any kind of guise or guile. It's about offering us the clear gift of restoration, redemption, salvation, and that's always been true. And we've mentioned how Habakkuk parallels so much of what is being said here. Habakkuk writing decades later, and Habakkuk in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 16, even without the promise of this restoration, says to God in his song that he writes in chapter 3, you go forth for the salvation of your people. He already knows, even though the vision of restoration wasn't given to him. He knows that it will be there because he knows the past and he knows God. And he knows that God's plan is always about the restoration, the redemption, and the salvation of his people. And that's what God says at the end of chapter 46. He's going to talk more about Babylonian comeuppance the next time we're together. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.